Hello friends, thank you for watching this video. I am Mohamad and today we're gonna be exploring something a bit new. Today we're gonna be building an iOS app which is basically gonna be consuming one of our APIs. We have already built an API called To Do, and basically it's a simple to-do application where basically we're able to add some to-do items, update them, delete them, so on and so forth. Today we're gonna be building an interface for it on iOS with basically a table. We'll be able to basically pull all of the information from the API and view it there. It's gonna be a simple application, but it's gonna be a starting point for us to get started in. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. It will really help the channel. So first things first, we're gonna be actually seeing what are we gonna be building today. We're gonna go through the application and then we're gonna actually build it step by step. So let's get started. So first things first, let us see what are we gonna be building today. So I already have an iOS simulator available here, and basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open the application that I have already created, and basically we can see here that we have our to-do list available for us, and basically it is in like a table view. So if you want to check this out, let's go to our web browser. And basically let us visit the Swagger page. And we can see here that we have our to-do API, basically 5 simple endpoints. So if we click on the first one and let's see what are the available items inside our to-do application. If we scroll a bit down, we can see here, let's get the simulator next to it. So we can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items, 6 items, and as we can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, there's a bit different. Let's see why is it different. So we have 1, 2, 3. So we have do shopping, our third item, read a book, play Xbox, play sports. Okay, so everything is there. Maybe the IDs here are a bit different. Yeah. Anyways, so basically what we are able to do here is basically we are able to consume an API through an iOS application. And this is a very simple implementation of this, but it's a good way for us to jumpstart our iOS development in order for us to move to a bigger project and bigger implementation. It's very good to start with a very minimal implementation at first. So in this video, we're gonna actually start by seeing how we can actually implement this, how we can actually integrate our iOS application with our API, how we can actually call the table, load the data, so on and so forth. So let's get started. First things first, I'm gonna basically stop the application and I'm gonna go to Xcode and stop the application from here. So okay, it's stopped. I'm gonna close Xcode because we're gonna be creating a brand new one. So let's close it, or let's move this to the side. Okay, that should be fine. And basically, the first thing that we're gonna be doing is let's go to our web browser. And basically we need to access our GitHub because the API is already created on GitHub. And if you want to get it, you can go to, let's go to GitHub and let's look for my GitHub. Again, please, if you're not following me on GitHub, please make sure you follow me there. And here what we're going to be doing, if we go to repositories, and we can see here the first one is going to be called v6 res api.net core 5. Basically I updated this application yesterday to .NET 6, so it's already up to date to the latest version of .NET. And once you go here, you can see that we have all of our applications code available for us. All you need to do is basically download this application into your own machine. You can either clone it or download it as a zip file, whatever you need to do it. I have already done this, and we can see here that we have the application here ready for us. So let's go through the application first. So basically what I did yesterday is I updated the application from .NET 5 to .NET 6, and I made sure that everything still works, as well as I have updated all of the NuGet packages. So here, for example, we have updated to the latest and greatest, which is going to be basically version 6.0.2. And at the end, we have here basically the to-do controller, and basically we have everything still works. So I tested all out, and all you need to do in order for you to have the API available on your machine, you need to clone the project from GitHub, and that should be basically done all of the work. So that's the first step. The second step is if you need the Mac in order for you to build your Xcode application or iOS application. And basically what we need to do is we need to go to the App Store. So let's go to the App Store. And basically inside the App Store, what we need to look for here is we need to look for Xcode. And once you click on Xcode, you can see here, this is going to be the first thing that's going to appear. If we click on it, we can see that the Xcode is provided by Apple and the developer tool, and we can see that we have a lot of different functionalities. All we need to do, because I have already downloaded, it says open, but if you haven't downloaded from before, you need to click on download, and then it will download on your machine. And beware, this will take a bit of time because it's a very big application. And once that is done, you can see here it's a 12.6 gigabit, so it's a giga, so it's very big. It's a very big application. Once basically it's downloaded, all you need to do is click on open, and it will basically open. Okay, great. So once we have done that and we have set up Xcode, the next step that we need to do is back to our API is we need to make sure that our .NET SDK is installed. So let's see how we can do that. All you need to do is type .NET -- version, and you should see here the latest version of the .NET SDK installed. And in my case, we have the latest version, which is going to be 6.0.200, which is the latest version by the time of this recording. So once we have done that, we have covered all of the foundations, so we can actually start developing our application. So first things first is let us go to Xcode. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be creating a new application. So when you open Xcode, you're going to see this screen, which is going to be the normal Xcode screen that you see. All you need to do is click on create a new Xcode project, and it's going to take you to this page. And within this page, it's going to give you different options of what you need to create. You can create basically an iOS app, iOS watch app, you can create a Mac app, you can create an iPhone app, an iPad, everything you can actually for the iOS platform or basically the Apple ecosystem, you can create through Xcode. But for now, because we're basically only creating an iOS app, basically what we're going to be utilizing is the app. You can actually create a game and also all of that, but for now we're going to go with the simplest version. It's going to be an app. So let's do this right now. App. Then it's going to ask you for your name. For the product name, we're going to call it demo to do v2 because I have already created one before. And basically, if you don't have a team, all you need to do is basically just create a team here and give the organization identifier. So here it should be, for example, anything that identify you. You can put for example, your first name and last name, anything you want. The other one is interface. We're going to be utilizing storyboard. The language is going to be Swift. So once we do all of that, we're going to click on next. And then it's going to ask us where are we going to put it. We're just going to put it here inside my desktop, inside the demo folder. And once everything is done, we can see that our application has been created for us. We can see that we have some classes available for us here on the left hand side. And basically we have our application here available with all of its information. So first things first, let us configure this page. So here it's asked us what type of application do you want to develop. All I want to say is I want to develop an iPhone application. I don't want to make it compatible with an iPad. The second thing is signing and compatibility. I have already done this, but if you're trying to run this, make sure that you actually select the team and basically you have a unique identifier, which could be your first name, last name, dot the name of the application, anything you want. So once you have done these two, the first thing that we need to do is we need to select what type of iOS simulator we want. We're just going to utilize the iPhone 13 Pro, and a quick way to actually run the application directly in your simulator is to press on the keyboard Command R, which basically is going to build the application and then it's going to run the application. It's a single command that's going to do two things, build and run. So once we do all of this, we can see that our application has launched. It's an empty application, doesn't do anything. And if we go, for example, back to the home screen, we can see that we have demo.2 v2 available for us directly out of the box. So what we did here is we created an application, we configured it for an iPhone, and once we have configured it for an iPhone, we just ran it to make sure that it's actually able to communicate with the simulator. And once we have made sure that it's communicating with the simulator, we were able to basically see the application. And in our case right now, it's completely empty. So that's going to be the first thing. So once we did all of that, let's stop. And now it's time for us to actually go to our main.storyboard and start adding all of the different components that we're going to be needing in order for us to actually build our table view for us to consume our API. So first things first is we're going to start actually by adding some items to our view controller. So on the top right hand side here, we can see that there's a small plus button. All we need to do is click on this plus button, and we're going to type inside the search table. And we can see here that we have a table view controller, we have table view, we have table view cell. So what we need here is a table view. So let's drag this to our screen, and we can see now we have a table view inside our screen. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to just center it. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making it responsive to a certain extent, so it will look good on all different screen sizes. So let's take this and let's make it 15 pixels if you want from every single side. So let's do this right now. So 15, we're adding some constraints. And once we do all of that, we just click on OK, add 4 constraints, and we can see basically it took all of the different sizes. So this is on iPhone 11. So if, for example, now we go for a small iPhone, like for, let's say for us, we can see it automatically resize. If we go something big as the 13 Max Pro, everything still works the same, 13 Pro. Perfect. So once we have done that, the next step is we need to add a cell. And you might think to yourself, okay, what is the cell and why do we need to add the cell here? So the way it works is because we have built this table view, what we need to do is we need to create some kind of a generic cell. And this generic cell, it's going to be utilized as a template. And this template, it's going to be actually every time when we want to add an item to our tables, it's going to take a copy of that cell to a certain extent, and it's going to be filling it up with the information. So that's basically the idea behind it. Is going to be like a demo prototype cell that we can actually refer back to in order for us to actually build the items inside our table view. So how do we add this cell? It's very easy. Or again, we need to click on the plus button up here, and we're going to look for table again, and we can see here that we have something called the table view cell, which is basically exactly what we want. And what we need to do is we need to take it and we need to drag it into the middle of the table, and we can see all of a sudden we have here a prototype cell which has automatically appeared out of nowhere, which is basically the thing that we have just dragged. And the thing that we need to do is once we have this here, inside on the right hand side we have something called an identifier, and basically this is how are we going to be actually be calling this cell. So basically it's going to give it an ID, a name that we can actually refer back to it, and for the sake of this we're just going to call it proto cell. And we type the name and we hit enter, and the identifier will be automatically saved for us. So we have done this so far. So now if we run this application, it should be empty, but let's run it and see what happened. So again, Command R, build succeeded, and we can see that our application is still empty. Because we don't have any information yet there, but at least right now we know from the source code that it already contains a table and a cell for us. Perfect. So once we have done that, let's stop the application. And what we need to do is basically we need to go to the code behind, or to the controller side. So basically if we think about it in an MVC pattern, if for example in a web development platform, if we have an MVC which is going to be the model view controller, we can think of the main.storyboard as our view. We can think about the view controller as our controller, and we don't have a model here right now. So basically this is going to be it. The main.storyboard is our view, and the view controller is going to be the controller that we're going to be actually utilizing in order for us to send, or basically to process the request of or basically send the request to the API to get the data. So basically here right now we need to work with the controller. So An easy way to do it is, we can see here that we have the view controller directly available for us. And what I did here is I tried to make this as big as possible, but I'm not sure why it's like this. Okay, let's see. So preference, so I made this 33. If we type anything here, what's happened? Okay, it should be fine then. So in order for us to actually communicate with the view controller, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be actually linking the table that we have with the controller. So basically what we need to do is we need to create some kind of a link, because right now the table exists on the UI side, but the controller doesn't know that it actually exists. So the way we actually link the UI with the controller side is we need to create something called an IB outlet. And basically what that means is we're actually telling the controller that, listen, we have a component on the front end that you need to actually be that you actually need to know about in order for us to be actually to process all of the requests that's coming in. So that's what we're going to be doing right now. We're going to create an IB outlet. So we go back to our main.storyboard, and a very easy way to create an IB outlet is here we can see that we have like a couple of lines called editor options. If we click on it, we have something called the assistant, and once we click on the assistant, we can see that we have our controller on one side and we have the view on another side. So let's click here on the table, and basically what we're going to be doing on our keyboard, we're going to be clicking on control, and we can see we can, as soon as we click on control, we can drag it, and we can drag it here into our controller, and it's gonna pop up with this. And this basically is gonna ask us what type of name or what type of reference we want to link our table view with our controller, and we're gonna give it a name. So we're gonna just call it as simple as table view. Very simple. And make sure that the connection is outlet, and the type is automatically selected to UI table view, and storage leave it as is, and we click on connect. And right now, if we even hover above this here button, we can see it's automatically referring to the UI table view inside our interface. So perfect. So once we have done that, the next step is we need to actually start building our utilization of this. So how can we do that? What we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating some extension method for our controller in order for us to make our application easy, and basically in order for us to be able to separate the code and make it more of a structured approach. So let's do this right now. First things first, we're going to create an extension. Before we do that, so if you might think to yourself, okay, if we have a table, it's very easy for us to populate it. All we need to do is just get the reference for the table and put dot, for example, data source, and fill it all in. Well, that's not really the case here inside Swift. Swift relies heavily on something called prototypes and delegates. And basically this is the way that we're going to be actually utilizing in order for us to utilize this. So if we think about a delegate, you can think about it in terms of web development, specifically in .NET, as interfaces. So for example, we must implement some kind of interfaces in order for our application to actually recognize some kind of functionality in order for it to actually start populating our data storage. So for example, if we want to fill the table with some information, we need to utilize a certain interface. If we want to, for example, interact, like if we want to click on it somewhere, we utilize a different interface, so on and so forth. So there's a different interfaces or delegates that we can actually utilize in order for us to actually populate this data or actually manipulate the table view. So for the sake of this, we're going to be utilizing one delegate, and this delegate will allow us to actually put data inside our table view. So let's do this right now. It's going to be extension, and okay, the font is still small. Let me try to make it big. Let's go again here, preference, text editing. I just want everything to be 12. Okay, that worked. Okay, great. So what we're gonna be doing here, let's make this a bit smaller. Let's move this to the side a bit and make this a bit more smaller, bigger. Okay, perfect. So extensions, and we're gonna utilize an extension to view controller, and we're gonna be adding a UI table view data source. And basically, because we can think, as we said, we can think about this as an interface, and if we're not implementing the right methods or the right functionality for this interface, it's gonna complain. And we can see here it's already started to complain. It's telling us that we did not implement these. So what we can do is we can click on fix, and we can see that it has automatically added one of the methods for us, which should be fine. But again, there's another method that we need to add. So first, let us build this method, and then we're gonna add a second method. So basically, let's see what's saying here. It's a method called TableView, and it's taking a UI TableView, which is the one that we have here, and then basically it has something called a cell for row at, which is basically, as we know, a table is forms of row, and basically this is a reference for every row that we currently have inside of our table. And the last thing, it says it returns a UI table view. So basically, remember the proto cell that we have added here. So basically what we need to do is we need to take a copy of that proto cell, fill it with information, and then return it back to the table view. So that's what we're going to be doing it right now. So first things first, we're going to create a variable. We're going to call it cell, and we're going to go to the table view that we have linked here with the IB outlet, and it's going to be table view dot dequery usable cell. So that's basically, we're telling the table view that inside your table view right now there is a reusable cell that we can actually utilize, and in our case it's gonna be called the proto cell. So that's the proto cell that we have added, and we have given its identifier. And basically here what we need to do is, in telling it under which row it is, we can tell it it's under the index path that we currently have. So we're going to say index path. Simple as that. So now that we have the cell, and basically we're referring to this cell here, and we have taken a copy of that cell, so we can actually populate it with what we want. And once we have done that, the next step is we need to fill some information inside the cell. Again, this is all for demo right now. So we're gonna say cell dot text, let's say text label, and we're gonna put text, and we're just gonna say this is a demo cell or demo information. Once we have done all of that, all we need to do is just return the cell. So we're going to say return cell, and currently this is actually make this method compatible. The next method that we need to add is, right now we already told the table view that okay, this is the cell that you're going to be taking, and this is how the information that's going to be stored inside, which is fine. But the next step is we need to tell the table view how many items exist currently. So basically how many rows it's going to be expected in order for it to actually build or populate our table view. So how do we do that? We need to actually add another method, and this method is going to allow us to actually set the number of rows. So let's do this right now. So we're going to have a func, gonna call it table view, and we can see here that the first thing which will show up for us is gonna be a number of rows in section, and it's gonna return an int. So this is exactly what we want, and what we're gonna be doing here is we're gonna return a hard-coded int. We should never do like this. This is only for demo purposes right now, so we can see how we can actually populate data. So in essence right now, if we run this, we should see in our simulator that we have 3 rows, and every row will contain the information. This is a demo info, this is demo info, this is demo info. So let's try this. So command run, and we don't see anything. So let's see why. One item that we have missed doing here is we have failed to link this into, we have failed to link our table view to these implementation. And this is a very important thing, because basically whenever, let's say we have 4 table views, for example, inside a single page, we need a way to tell when the view loads, we need a way to tell that for every table view that we currently have, to which implementation is gonna utilize, or basically which delegate is gonna be utilizing. So that's a very important point that we need to add on the loading of every view. So for this, inside the view did load, what we need to do is we need to type TableView dot data source, and we're gonna say equal to self. So this might sound weird. Why are you saying TableView.data source is equal to self? So let's hover above this. And if we click on option, I think, options, let's delete this and see what does it actually require. So basically what we did here is that the TableView data source is, we are telling it that it needs to link to the controller itself. We're telling it that the controller of this view that we currently have, you're going to be utilizing it in order for you to populate this data. And all of this is part of the delegate platform or delegate implementation that iOS provide. We're gonna go deep into the delegate methodology in another video, but for now let us utilize it as is. So let's do again command run, and right now we should be able to see the information popping up. And as we can see, we have this demo info, this demo info, this demo info available 3 times for us. And we can actually, if we want to add more, for example, let's say we want, I don't know, 20, and we run again, we can see that we have 20 information automatically popping in for us with all of the different as well. If we want to see, for example, how it's actually populating for every row, a nice thing that we can do is we can do some string interpolation, and we can put index path dot row, and that basically will give us the row number. So let's run this. And we can see that it starts with 0 and go all the way to 19, because basically it's an array from 0 to 19 because it's 20 objects in it. So we have here, for example, we can see how it actually populates every one of them, which is great. So now that we have our first step, which is basically populating the data with dummy, populating the table view with dummy data, the next step is for actually us to actually implement the call to our API, pull down the data, decode it, or basically serialize it, and then actually giving it back to the table view for it to load. But let us see the table view. Let's go back to our API. So let's go to our web browser, and inside of here we can see that we have here this API will return an array of objects, and this array of objects contain four items. It contains an ID, a title, a description, and a done. So right now what we're going to be taking is we're going to take the ID, the title, as well as done, and basically we're going to be able to utilize these. So how do we do that? As we do with a normal web development, we need to have a DTO, which is data transfer object, in order for us to process the request which is an API is sending us. Similarly, in iOS, we need to actually have some kind of a DTO in order for us to take it and process it. But in iOS, we don't. The best approach in order for us to do this is utilizing a struct. And struct is similar to a class. There's a lot of differences. For now, we're not going to delve into it. If you have a question, please put them in the comments down below, and I will make sure to answer these. But for now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a struct, and this struct is going to be actually responsible for serializing the objects that we're going to be getting from the API. So let's go back to Xcode, and here we need to right click and we need to click on new file. And inside this new file, it's going to tell us what type of file do you want to create. We're just going to create a Swift file. I'm going to click on next, and here we're going to actually name it to do item. Very simple. And once we click on that, we're going to click on create, and we should be able to see here that we have a to do item which automatically popped this for us. So we can think about this again. This is going to be as simple as creating a class, but for here in iOS, we're going to be utilizing a struct. So let's start with this, and just to do an extra reference here, so if you know with .NET 6 or .NET 5 we have something called records got introduced. We can think of a struct similar to a record, and a way to differentiate a struct with a class similar to we can differentiate a record with the with a class. So just a point that I'd like to mention here. So now let's start building our struct. So it's going to be struct, and we called it to do item. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be inheriting this codable class. So what does this mean, inheriting a codable? Which we are telling that this struct is serializable. We're telling iOS and we're telling Swift, okay, listen, we're gonna be utilizing this struct in order for us to serialize objects from an API. So basically, once we do that, Swift will add a lot of like different information, or we can think of metadata. So once we're actually utilizing it, we'll be able to know, okay, this struct is the serializable. So basically, because it knows it's serializable, it will be able to pull, it will be able to actually do all of the serialization for us in the background without actually us having to download an extra third-party library in order for us to do all of the serialization. Swift will take care of all of that for us. So that's why we need to actually inherit codable into our struct. So once we have done that, the next step is we need to specify all of the items that we want inside our struct. So first of all, it's gonna be let, we're gonna utilize the ID, and we're gonna say it's of type int, and then we're gonna say another let, which is gonna be the title, and it's gonna be of type string, and the last one is let, we're gonna put done, and it's gonna type boolean. I think that should be enough. Let's build it. Command B, in order for us to build it, we can see it built successfully. So once we have done that, the next step is we need to go back to our view controller, and we can do it from here, or we can go to main and we can have them both simultaneously. Let's use this view. Let's make this a bit bigger. So let's make this here smaller. Okay, perfect. So once we have done this, the next step for us is basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating an array, an empty array of our to-do item in order for us to start adding more information to it. So how do we do that? We're going to put var, we're going to say all items equal a to-do item array. So basically here what we are doing is just basically initializing an empty to-do item array. Perfect. So once we have done that, we have initialized empty the to-do item array. The next step, it's gonna be for us to actually create a method which is gonna be called, for example, load data, and we're gonna be actually linking it to our view.load, so it will actually execute whenever the view is loading and get the information. So how do we create a method? Very simple, as we did before. Func, we're gonna call it load items or load data, whatever we want. And basically here right now, inside this method, we're gonna be actually start the initial calls for our API in order for us to pull the data in. So first of all, we need to specify the URL. So we're gonna say API URL, and the best way to do that is, let's go back here to our web browser, and we can see that we have this request URL. So let's copy this request URL and let's come here and paste it. So this is gonna be the request URL that we currently have. The next step is basically we need to make sure that we need to convert this string, because currently this is a string, we need to convert it to a URL. So we say if let URL equal URL session, and basically we need to specify the URL string, or actually it's not URL session, it's going to be URL, and see which one is it. I think it's going to be string, and we're going to be passing the API URL. So what does this do? So basically what we're doing here is we're taking the string and we are converting it to a URL. So the if let means that if let's say for example we have this API URL is empty and we're trying to initialize a URL out of it, it's going to be an empty URL that we're going to be returning. So if by the way we implement if let, it means that if the URL is not empty, you can continue. If it is empty, you need to skip it. So basically if let means here that if we are creating a variable inside the if statement, and we're trying to put information in, and this variable is checking if it's empty or not. So that's what if let mean here. We are checking the variable that we're creating from the URL if it's empty or not, and based on that we're actually populating the data, or we're going to continue with the data or not. So that's the first step. Let's add a comment here of how does this work. So we're going to say checking if the API URL is empty and valid, empty or not, sorry. Okay, that's the first step. The second step is we need to create a session. So let's do this and then we'll explain what a session is. Session equal URL session, and we're gonna pass the configurations, and we're gonna say it's gonna be the default one. Okay, so as we know, if we're gonna do any API calls, what we need to do is, first of all, is we need to specify what are we going to be calling, which API endpoint we're going to be calling it, and then once we do the swap call, it's going to be like creating a session, or we're creating an instance. So basically what we're doing is the application is going to go, let's say we're running an iOS application. This application, although it's running on a main process, another process or another session or another task, if you want to think about it that way, is going to be initiated, and this initiation is going to be basically calling that API, getting the data, and processing the information that we're getting back. So for this reason, we're utilizing the URL session. Again, all of these functionalities are available for us out of the box with Swift. You can actually utilize different libraries in order for you to do web calls. The most famous one is Alamofire, which has a similar concept, but for now we're utilizing the default one that comes with Swift. If you want more information about Alamofire, let me know and we'll create a video about that. So once we have done all of this, the next step is we need to create a task. So as we said, it's a session, it's going to be running asynchronously, so we need to create a task for that. So let task equal session dot data task. So we're telling it that this session is going to be requesting data, and we're going to be getting data back, and we're going to tell it that it's going to work with a URL, and this URL is going to be the URL that we have initialized here, this one exactly. Excuse me. And basically, okay, there's something else that we need to do. So let's see the different options so we can actually work on this. So data URL. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to take this one, not actually only the URL. We're going to take the URL with a completion handler. So let's click on that, and we're going to be discussing it as we go. So what does this mean? So as we said here, the URL is going to be the URL that we have created, which is going to be a simple URL. And basically here, data with a completion handler, it's going to be basically the data that we're going to be actually getting. So if you know, for example, with JavaScript, you know, when we do an asynchronous call, you get back the response, and this response is attached to the main request, and from there you can actually get the response, the error code, in case there's anything, or basically different information. So in Swift, it has a similar methodology to that. So once you do the call, what you need to do is you actually attach a completion to it. So for example, you are telling, okay, once you complete this call to the API, and once you do all of this to the API, what we need to do is we need to take this information back, and we need to process information. But how are we going to be doing that? There is no direct function there. So what we're doing is we're actually having here something called a data completion. So all of this information, there's different implementation that we can take. So if the data is correct, the errors, so on and so forth, and we can actually work with that. So that's what we're utilizing here. So let's do this right now. So once we have done all of that, let us change this to something more usable. So let's do it like this, data. Actually, I don't want it capitalized, so we can put the response. And lastly, we can put error. And here, basically, right now, we can start building our code. So the first thing first that we're going to be doing, we need to check if this error is empty or not. So if it's empty, we need to, if it's not empty, we need to stop and show the error. So if, again, we're going to utilizing the if let, and basically the if let means here again, if it's not empty, it will allow us to actually check it. So similar to null checks. So it's going to be if, or actually we can say if error not equal nil, we can put print error. That's it, and we just return. So basically we stop the processing of our application directly right there and there. So that's the first thing. Second thing is we need to get the information. So it could be like if let save data equal data. So what does this mean? So sorry, here it's asking us to falsely unwrap it. I think this should be fine. Okay, so what does this mean? So as we said before, in case there was an error, we'll need to show it here. But this means the data that's gonna be returned to us is gonna be empty. So in order for us to actually process this data, what we need to do is we need to check if it's null or not. And if it's not null, we can actually continue and implementing it. So if let's save data equal data, it will allow us to basically store whatever information inside our save data, and then we're checking if save data is null. We don't go in. If it's not null, we'll go in and continue the implementation. So that's the first thing. So once we have checked that it's not empty, the next step for us, it's gonna be to actually process this data. So once we have set up the save data, the next step for us is to actually utilize it. So the way we do it is gonna be basically we need to create some kind of way where we're gonna actually serialize this save data into actually usable objects so we can put them in our all item arrays. So we're gonna be basically creating a new method. And this method is going to be func, and we're going to call it Parse Json, which is going to be the file that basically the API is going to return for us. And we're just going to call it to do data as data, or forget the A here. And basically once that is done, we're going to initialize a decoder. So similarly to what we do usually, we need to excuse me, specialize a decoder so we can actually utilize it. So we're going to say let decoder equal JSON decoder. And once we have specified the JSON decoder, what we need to do is we need to do like a try catch basically to make sure that the decoding works as it should, and if there's any errors we can catch it. So how we do it, the try catch in Swift, we just put do, and then after we put the catch, and we put here print. If there's any error, we can see it directly. And now inside the do, what we can do is we can put let decoded data. So basically this is the data after it's being decoded or serialized. Try decoder dot decode, and basically it's gonna ask us excuse me, what type of decoding protocol, or basically to what type do we want to do. So we can just put we want to decode it to an array, so of the do items. We need to put .self. So basically in C# this could be to this. So we're basically referring to the actual object instead of initializing it. And we're specifying here the data, which is going to be the to-do data. And once that has been completed successfully, what we want to do is that data, because it has already now being serialized to a to-do item array, we need to save it into our all items. So it's going to be all items equal decode data. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So basically we took the data as a JSON from here, and then once we took it as a JSON, what we did is we just referred to an array of the do item data, and we just decoded it, and then we basically that information we saved it into the array that we have here. So once we have done all of that, the next step here is we need to call this function here. So it's going to be because it's going to be basically parse JSON. We're gonna see that why this is not gonna work. We're gonna put save data, and now this compiler or Xcode is gonna say it's good, because we're utilizing this in async method. We are not actually able to refer back to this. So the way we do that is all we need is we say self parse.json, which basically tell the compiler that okay, you need to look somewhere outside the async thread that you are currently working in order for you to actually find this method. And when we put self, it will be actually be able to connect to the main view controller that we have to find that method there. So once we have done that, the next step is, because right now this actually for all of our information is the data is getting pulled down from the API, it's being put into the all item. The next two things that we need to do is we need to actually send this information back to the view, and then basically we need to reload our view controller, reload our UI table view here source. We need to change this with the latest information from the array. So instead of utilizing this demo information, we need to update something with the arrays. So let's do this right now. So let's focus on another thing. So because we said that this call to the API is going to be an async, so it's going to be working completely on a different thread. The UI is going to be working on a thread, and the call to the web API is going to be on a different thread. So the way we merge back from the web API to the main thread is we need to utilize something called dispatch queue, and it's a method inside Swift that will allow us to actually send the information back to the main thread safely without actually having any thread issues inside our application, because this is really important, because those two are working in parallel, and this is a very good way for us to actually pull back the information in. So let's do this. So in order for us, we need to use dispatch queue .main. So we're telling it that you need to connect with the main one, and we're gonna telling it that you need to connect to it on an async method. And then once that is done, we're just putting self data table, is it data table, table view dot reload data. So that's basically it for here. And something else we need to do, in case this empty URL is here, we need to basically just redo the same thing. Before we do this, we need to continue the task. So we need to put task.resume. So that will mean that in case the task has completed all of this, it needs to resume. So it will basically get rid of the threads, the threads in a safe way. And then once that's done, we need to basically do the self.TableView again, .reload data. Reload data. Okay, perfect. So once we have done all of that, the next step for us is we need to update our UI table view data source in order for us to utilize all of this new information. So first things first, in order for us to know how many rows that exist currently inside our table, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be referring to the array that we have, which is all items, and we're just going to say count. So no matter how many arrays, how many items exist in this current array, this is how many rows that we're going to be having. And instead of displaying this random text here, we're going to utilize this. So let's copy this, but let's remove the rest. Let's actually utilize it. So we're going to utilize the all items, and we're just going to pass the index path array, and then we're going to say that we want to display a title. A simple array manipulation basically. And let's build to make sure that everything is building as it should be. Build succeeded, and now let's run. And we didn't get anything. And the main reason that we did not get anything is because we have not actually linked the load item method to our view.load. So that's the missing piece. We need to actually tell it that it needs to load the stuff from the API. So let's run this again. And basically we can see here that we have an error, and let's see what this error is. It's telling us that the giving data was not a valid JSON. Okay, so let's see how we can resolve this. So what we can do is let us print out the data. So we'll say print, because the save data is currently in a data format, we need to convert it to a string. We're gonna put save data. And let's see what are we gonna get with this. Okay, it's not happy with it. Cancel. It's not match the initializer. Let's see the initializer. Data. It's gonna be save data. This gonna be happy with it? No. UTF-8. Okay, I think that should be fine because basically we're converting the data right now to a string. Okay, I think that should be work. So let's Command R, let's run, let's replace. Okay, so it's getting an empty. So let's make sure that our API is running. I think that's the main issue. Our API is not, yes, our API is not running. So let's run this, .NET run. Perfect, it's running. Let's run our application again. Let's stop it, Command R. And we got our items directly. We got the shopping items, we had our to-do, read a book, play Xbox, so on and so forth. Everything is working. So let us try this. Let us go to our web browser and let us add a new item here. So let's post a to-do item and let's click on try it out. So we'll ID will give it, I don't know, 8. String will give it make iOS app. Description, build a mobile app, and then we'll keep it as true. Let's send execute. We got a 201, and now if we let's go back here to our simulator and let's close the application from here. So let's close this and let's click on this again. We can see that we automatically got the new item that we've created, make an iOS app directly. Perfect. So this basically this is the last part of our video for today. So let's do a quick recap of what we have done. So first of all, we just took an existing API that we have built previously with a simply called operation for to-do items. Then what we did is we created an iOS app. We were able to create a table view, a prototype cell, and then we were able to connect the delegates for those for that table view inside our view controller. Once we have done that, we created an empty array. Once we created the empty array, basically then we have created a struct which is going to be responsible for the serialization of the data. Once we did all of the serialization, we have built all of that. We basically implemented the delegate methods. Once we implemented the delegate method, we created load data functionality, which basically create a session, connects to the API, pull the data, serialize it, and give it back to the table view. This is a very simple implementation. It's just like trying to try different things. If you like this types of video, something other than just building web application, was actually or building web APIs and trying to consuming these web APIs, please feel free to let me know in the comments down below. I hope this video has been really helpful. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a great day. Thank you very much for watching.